The bridge and the stranger, the blackout started like a sigh. Streetlights blinked once and died. Neon signs sputtered, and for a heartbeat the whole city seemed to inhale. Stunned and silent. Zoe and Trent were halfway across the 33rd Street Bridge when it happened. The air around them went still, the river below turning into a dark mirror. For a moment, only the moon gave shape to their faces. "Guess the grid finally gave up," Trent muttered, lighting another cigarette. The tiny flame flicked against his jaw, brief and dangerous. "Come on, it's not far." Zoe hesitated. She could feel the cold through her sneakers now, the first whisper of night catching up to her. "You sure this place is safe?" He smirked. "You scared?" She wanted to say no, but the word caught in her throat. They walked in silence until the bridge ended, boots scraping against the wet concrete. The city beyond was a patchwork of shadow and dim orange glow. Generators rumbling, candles flickering in apartment windows. Trent led her down an alley behind an old textile mill, the kind of building that still smelled like grease and dust from the 50s. A padlocked gate hung crooked on one hinge. He kicked it open. "This used to be my uncle's place," he said. "He left years ago. I come here sometimes when I need space." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil and old metal. Broken machines hunched in the corners like sleeping giants. Trent found a blanket in a crate and tossed it onto the floor. "Home sweet home." Zoe managed a small laugh. "It's something." He dropped down beside her, phone light flickering across his face. "You're lucky, you know. Most people don't have someone who gets it." "Gets what?" "Parents. Rules. All that fake love they call protection." His voice had an edge to it, something sharp hiding under charm. Zoe looked away. "She wasn't always like that. My mom, she used to sing while she cooked." "I don't know what happened." Trent leaned back, eyes half closed. "People don't change. They just get tired of pretending." Zoe wasn't sure if he was talking about her mother or himself. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the faint dripping from a leaky pipe. Then Zoe asked, almost to herself, "What if she's worried about me?" Trent shrugged. "She kicked you out, didn't she?" "Yeah, but..." "Then let her worry." Something in his tone made her skin prickle. She turned to look at him, the glint in his eyes, the way his smile didn't reach them. The boy she'd imagined from messages didn't quite match the one sitting beside her now. She reached for her phone again, but the battery was nearly dead. No service. No light but the dim halo of Trent's cigarette. He noticed her unease and grinned. "Relax, Zoe. You're safe here." But she wasn't sure she believed him. Back across town, Laura lit another candle. The house felt enormous in the dark. The fridge had stopped humming, the clock had gone silent. Every sound she made felt amplified. The scratch of the match, the creak of the floorboards. She sat by the window again, staring at the storm rolling over the river. Somewhere, out there, her daughter was alone. She wanted to call the police, but what would she say? "My daughter threw coffee at me, then ran off." She's 17 and angry and probably fine. No, she couldn't do that. Not yet. Her eyes drifted to the drawer again, the one where she kept the coin. She took it out, rolling it between her fingers. 12 years sober. 12 years of fighting for control. And then, like a whisper from the past, her mind conjured a memory she hadn't asked for. It was winter, years ago, the kind of Pittsburgh cold that hurt to breathe. Laura sat in her old car outside the mill, a flask on the dashboard, hands trembling. Her baby, Zoe, was at home with a neighbor, asleep in a borrowed crib. Mark had been the one who found her that night. He'd opened the car door, taken the flask from her hands, and said quietly, "You can't keep doing this." "Laura," she'd looked up at him, eyes glassy. "You think I don't know that?" "I think you need help." I think you need to mind your own damn business. But he hadn't left. He'd stayed, his breath white in the air, until she finally broke, sobbing, shaking, clutching the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. He'd driven her to the clinic himself, waited outside until dawn. Then, when she came out with red eyes and a trembling voice, he'd just said, "Start fresh. I'll cover your shift." And he had, for weeks, until one day he was gone. No note. Just gone. Now, all those years later, his voice still lingered like a melody half forgotten. The wind rattled the window. A siren wailed in the distance, fading into silence. Laura stood, went to the kitchen, and turned the faucet. Nothing. The pipes were out too. Perfect, she muttered. She went to the cupboard, grabbed her flashlight, and aimed it toward the door. She couldn't sit there anymore. If she stayed, she'd lose her mind. She pulled on her coat and stepped outside. The air was cold and damp, carrying the faint smell of the river. The street was nearly black, save for a few candles flickering in windows. A group of kids passed by with flashlights, laughing. Someone's generator coughed to life down the block. She started walking. At the mill, Zoe couldn't sleep. The floor was hard, the blanket smelled like dust, and Trent had started pacing. "You ever think about just leaving?" he said suddenly. "Like not this city, and I mean everything? Just disappearing," Zoe frowned. "And go where?" "Doesn't matter. Anywhere that's not here. You and me. We could figure it out." The words should have sounded romantic. They didn't. He looked at her, eyes glinting in the dark. "You trust me, right?" She hesitated. "I guess." He stepped closer. "Then prove it." Her stomach nodded. "What do you mean?" He smiled, slow and deliberate. "I got a friend, a deals in parts, tech, stuff like that. He'll pay good money if we help move some things tonight." "No big deal." Zoe's pulse quickened. "Stealing?" "It's not stealing, it's redistribution." She shook her head. "I can't." "Sure you can." His tone hardened. "You need money, right? A place to stay." "That's how the world works." She backed up a step, heart pounding. "I think I should go." He laughed softly, but it didn't sound amused. "Go where, princess?" "Power's out, buses are dead, and you deleted your mom's number, remember?" She froze. How did he know that? Trent stepped closer. "You're not the only one who reads messages, Zoe." The air felt colder suddenly, heavy with realization. Zoe's hand went to her backpack. Inside, the small pocket knife her mother had given her years ago for emergencies. She'd never used it, but tonight it might be the only thing standing between her and regret. Back on Stanton Street, Laura turned the corner toward the river. The power plant's red lights blinked faintly in the distance, and the smell of ozone thickened the air. Somewhere, deep inside her, a mother's instinct burned, the unshakable sense that her daughter was near and in trouble. She whispered into the dark, "Hold on, Zoe, just hold on." Thunder rumbled overhead, and somewhere beneath that bridge, two lives were about to collide with the past Laura thought she'd left behind. The coffee and the Clash Pittsburgh always smelled like metal and morning regret. Even on good days, the air carried a faint tang of rust and rain, as if the whole city were exhaling the memory of furnaces long gone cold. Laura Benton's hands were the kind that told stories, the kind of stories forged in heat and fatigue. Calloused palms, a thin scar running between her thumb and forefinger, and a stubborn streak of grit that had gotten her through 20 years at the Penforge factory. That morning, she'd brewed coffee like she always did. Black, strong, without ceremony. It wasn't the kind of coffee that comforted you. It was the kind that kept you standing when your body begged to quit. But Zoe didn't want coffee. She wanted out. Laura didn't know it yet, but that day was the day her daughter would finally explode. Zoe had been home for weeks on summer break, holed up in her room, lights off, screen glow flickering through the crack beneath her door. Laura told herself it was just what kids did now, that endless hum of keys and giggles from voices she couldn't see. But something in her gut had been whispering that trouble was brewing. When Laura knocked on her door that morning, she expected silence. What she got was venom. "What do you want?" Zoe's voice was sharp, brittle, like glass about to break. "Breakfast. I made coffee. I don't drink that sludge." "You used to," Laura said quietly. "When you were little. You'd dip your toast in my cup and, yeah, well, I'm not little anymore." Laura stepped closer, saw the screen behind Zoe flashing something. A chat, faces she didn't recognize. "Who are you talking to all day?" Zoe spun around. "You don't get to ask that. You wouldn't understand anyway. You don't even know me." "I'm your mother," Laura said softly. "That's supposed to mean something. It means control. It means guilt trips and your stupid rules." And then it happened. Zoe's hand shot out, grabbed the mug Laura was holding, and flung it. The coffee hit Laura square in the face. Scalding. Bitter, humiliating. "You're as gross as this brew." Zoe shouted, chest heaving, eyes bright with something wild. For a second, time froze. The steam rose between them like a ghost. Laura stood there, coffee dripping from her chin, her shirt clinging to her skin. She didn't yell, didn't move, just wiped her face with the back of her hand. Then, in a voice so calm it made Zoe's anger sound childish, she said, "Pack your things? You can't stay here." Zoe blinked, her expression faltering. "What?" "You heard me. You're grown enough to throw things at your mother, then you're grown enough to find a place to sleep tonight." It wasn't rage. It was heartbreak in slow motion. Zoe stormed off, muttering curses. But Laura didn't chase her. She just stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty doorway, at the faint drip of coffee staining the floor. That night, when the house was silent, Laura sat by the window, a single lamp humming beside her. Outside, the city looked tired, streetlights flickering, the hum of a distant train echoing across the river. She whispered to no one, "I won't let her ruin herself the way I almost did." Because once upon a time, Laura Benton had her own demons in a bottle. Not coffee, but something far stronger. And though she'd buried that part of herself, the past had a way of seeping through cracks. And as Zoe disappeared into the night, Laura felt the first chill of a storm neither of them were ready for. The streets and the screen. Zoe didn't cry. Not right away. The night air was thick with exhaust and the faint metallic hum that never seemed to leave Pittsburgh. The bus stop light flickered overhead, buzzing like a dying fly. Zoe's backpack hung off one shoulder, stuffed with a few shirts, her phone charger, and a half-empty bottle of peach soda. She hadn't even grabbed a coat. She didn't need one. Not yet. The fire in her chest kept her warm. Her mother's words echoed, sharp as glass. "Pack your things." Laura never raised her voice. That's what made it worse. Anger you could fight. Calm was harder. Calm meant she meant it. Zoe kicked at a crumpled paper cup near her sneaker. It skidded across the wet pavement and stopped by a drain. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling slightly. "Trent. You okay?" "Zoe. Not really." "Got kicked out. Trent. LOL for what?" "Zoe. Long story." "Can I crash somewhere?" "Trent. Yeah. Meet me by the bridge." The message sat there, glowing. It was stupid, she knew. But stupid felt better than alone. The bus hissed to a stop, doors creaking open. She climbed on, dropped a few coins in the slot, and sank into the cracked vinyl seat. The air smelled like old rain and metal. A familiar Pittsburgh scent. The city she'd always dreamed of escaping felt suddenly enormous. Out the window, the lights blurred. Gas stations, shuttered diners, a half-lit billboard for a steel museum nobody visited anymore. Her reflection stared back, pale and scared and pretending not to be. At the next stop, a man got on. Heavy boots, steelworker jacket, eyes that had seen too many night shifts. He glanced at her. Not leering, just curious. "You okay, kid?" he asked gruffly. "Yeah," she lied. He nodded, then stared out the window again. Zoe looked at her phone. No new messages. She imagined Trent. His voice, low and confident, the way he talked about making real money and breaking free. He'd said he had a plan, a side hustle, a way out. For the first time that night, fear crept in, but she swallowed it down. Meanwhile, at the Benton house, the quiet had teeth. Laura sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the wood, staring at the dark window. The reflection staring back wasn't kind. Tired eyes, deep lines, the faint shadow of a woman who'd worked too many shifts and slept too few nights. On the counter sat the mug Zoe had thrown, cracked at the rim, coffee stain bleeding into the tile grout. Laura should have cleaned it up hours ago, but she couldn't move. Her mind drifted back, uninvited, to another night. 15 years earlier. A bottle of whiskey. The sound of Zoe crying in her crib. The way the world tilted as she stumbled toward her baby, whispering apologies into the dark. That was before rehab. Before she clawed her way out of the hole. Before she promised herself she'd never let that darkness touch her daughter again. She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and whispered to no one. Not again. I won't lose her again. The phone on the wall rang. Once, twice. She grabbed it. Hello? Static, then a voice she hadn't heard in years. Laura! It's Mark, her breath caught. Mark Hanley. A name she hadn't said aloud in almost 2 decades. The man who'd once made her believe in clean starts and slow dances in the break room. The one who'd left when her drinking got bad. Mark? She said softly. Yeah. I heard through Darlene you still live near Stanton Street. Power plant's running overtime tonight. We've got blackouts rolling through downtown. Just wanted to check you're okay. She smiled faintly. Still breathing. He hesitated. You sound tired. Long day, she almost told him. About Zoe, about the coffee, but her throat closed. Some wounds weren't ready to be seen. They talked for a few minutes. Polite, careful words. He said he might stop by the plant tomorrow. She said maybe she'd make coffee. They both knew what that meant, and didn't say it. When she hung up, the silence felt different. He'd stirred something she'd buried. Not romance, exactly. Just the memory of feeling seen. Then she noticed the storm rolling in. Heavy clouds, wind whining through the eaves. The power flickered once, twice, and went out. Across town, Zoe reached the bridge. The river below glimmered with faint city light, oily ripples twisting through the dark. Trent was already there, taller than she expected, hoodie up, cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. You came, he said with a grin. You said you'd help. I will. He exhaled smoke, looked her up and down. You look rough. Thanks, he laughed softly. I mean, you'll be fine. I got a place. Kind of. Kind of? He shrugged. It's not mine, technically, but the guy's out of town. We crash, no problem. Something inside her twisted, but his eyes were kind, or at least convincing, and she was tired. So tired. As they walked, Zoe's phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. Zoe, it's Mark. Your mom's worried. Where are you? She stared at it, confused. Mark? Who the hell was Mark? Trent saw her expression. Everything cool? Yeah, just spam. She deleted it. They crossed under a broken streetlight, their shadows stretching long and thin on the concrete. And at home, Laura lit a candle. The flame flickered against the window, soft and trembling. She whispered into the dark, "Please let her be safe." Outside, thunder rolled again, and somewhere across the city, a fuse blew, half of Pittsburgh went black. If you're still watching and enjoying this, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a quick comment. It helps a lot. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Your support truly means the world and keeps us going strong. Now let's continue. Ash and Echo's rain began to fall in slow, heavy drops, the kind that didn't just wet the city, but seemed to weigh it down. The air smelled of wet steel and burnt rubber. Pittsburgh, that old, wounded beast, lay half asleep beneath the blackout, its bridges stretching like ribs over a dark river. Laura walked fast, flashlight beam bobbing against cracked sidewalks. Her boots splashed through puddles, coat pulled tight around her shoulders. Every few blocks, she'd stop and listen. For a car, for a voice, for anything, but all she heard was the city breathing. She passed the old textile mill, the one she used to work near in her 20s, before the factory closed. It stood like a skeleton, windows broken, door hanging loose. Something about it made her pause. Maybe it was the faint light flickering inside. Or maybe it was the way the air around it felt charged. Like a held breath, she hesitated, then stepped closer. Inside, Zoe sat rigid, her back to the cold wall, eyes fixed on Trent. The dim glow of his phone cast long shadows across the concrete floor. His voice had gone low, coaxing. Too soft to be kind. "Don't look at me like that," he said, crouching in front of her. "I'm not the bad guy here. You said you wanted to be free. This is how you do it." "I didn't mean this," Zoe whispered. Trent smirked, standing. "You think freedom's some pretty word in a song? Freedom costs, Zoe. It costs everything." He turned to a duffel bag in the corner and unzipped it. Inside were wires, small metal cases, and something that looked like a dismantled laptop. "What are you doing?" "Moving product." He glanced at her, his grin stretched thin. "Relax. I told you it's not stealing." But Zoe knew. She wasn't stupid. These weren't just parts. He shoved the bag toward her. "Carry it." Her heart thudded. "No," his expression darkened. "Don't make me ask twice." Zoe's fingers brushed her backpack. The knife was there. She could feel the cool metal through the fabric. And then, through the broken windows, thunder rolled again, followed by a faint beam of light sweeping through the darkness. Trent froze. "What the hell?" Zoe looked toward the doorway, a figure with a flashlight moving carefully, calling out a single name that sliced through the air like a prayer. Zoe. Her mother's voice. Laura's beam caught a movement. Two shadows near the back of the mill. She took a cautious step forward, heart racing. "Zoe?" She called again. "Stay back!" The shout came sharp, male, angry. Laura froze. "Who's there?" Trent stepped into the light, eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't be here." And then she saw Zoe, standing behind him, shaking. Laura's breath caught. "Baby?" Zoe's voice cracked. "Mom," Trent grabbed her arm. "We're leaving." "No, we're not." Zoe wrenched away, the sudden movement sending the duffel sliding across the floor. Something metallic clattered out. The flashlight beam hit it. A small black device with a wire sticking out. Laura's stomach dropped. "What is that?" Trent's voice hardened. "Not your problem." But Laura wasn't backing down. She took another step forward. "Let her go." Trent's jaw tightened. "Lady, you don't get it. You walk away now, everyone stays fine. Laura's pulse pounded. For a split second, she saw him not as a man, but as a shadow. The kind that waits for broken people to walk too close to the edge. "Zoe," she said, voice low and steady. "Come here." Her daughter hesitated. 1 second too long. Trent lunged forward, grabbing the bag. And that's when the world split open. A sound like lightning cracked overhead, a transformer exploding somewhere down the block. The flash lit up the mill in a white blaze, and the floor trembled. The lights went out completely. Zoe screamed. Laura dropped to the ground, searching in the dark. "Zoe, I'm here. Move toward me." She could hear Trent cursing, stumbling over debris. Metal scraped against concrete. Then, the faint flick of a lighter. Laura turned, caught a glimpse of Trent's face in the flame's glow. The same second, Zoe's hand shot out, the glint of her small knife catching that light. "Don't touch her." Trent stepped back, eyes wide. "Whoa, easy." The knife trembled in Zoe's hand, not from aggression, but fear. Laura's voice cracked. "Zoe, drop it. It's over." But before anyone could move, the roof above them groaned, old wood and rusted metal giving way from the earlier blast. A beam snapped loose. Laura lunged forward without thinking, grabbed Zoe by the shoulders and shoved her aside just as the beam crashed to the floor where she'd been standing. The impact shook the ground, sending dust and sparks into the air. When the echo faded, the mill was silent except for their ragged breathing. Trent was gone. Laura knelt on the floor, coughing, pulling Zoe close. "You okay?" Zoe nodded, tears streaking her face. You could have died." "I wasn't going to let that happen again," Laura whispered, voice hoarse. "Not after everything I already lost." They stayed like that for a long moment, two silhouettes against the faint, blue-gray dawn creeping through the broken glass. Outside, sirens began to rise in the distance, slow, mournful wails. The city was waking up to its own damage. Laura stood, still holding Zoe's hand. "Come on, let's go home." Zoe hesitated. "You're not mad?" Laura's eyes softened. "Mad? Baby, I've been mad at myself for so long, I forgot how to feel anything else. But right now, all I am is grateful you're here." They stepped out into the drizzle. The first hint of sunrise glowed weakly through the clouds. Zoe leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. For the first time in years, she didn't flinch. Back in the house, later that morning, Laura lit the stove by match. The power was still out. She poured water into the dented kettle and set it to boil. Zoe sat at the table, wrapped in a blanket, silent. When the water hissed, Laura poured it into the mug with practiced grace. The smell filled the room. Bitter, grounding, familiar. Zoe looked up, eyes red. "You still drink that?" Laura smiled faintly. "Always." Zoe hesitated, then reached across the table. "Can I try?" Laura blinked, surprised, moved. She pushed the mug toward her. Zoe took a cautious sip, winced, then smiled. "Still gross." "Yeah," Laura said softly, "but it keeps you awake." They both laughed, a small, fragile sound in a house that hadn't heard laughter in far too long. Outside, the rain eased. The city exhaled, but in the quiet that followed, neither of them noticed the shadow across the street. A man in a hoodie, watching from behind the fence. Trent, a cut on his cheek. Blood dried along his knuckles. He stared at the house for a long time, eyes unreadable. Then he turned and walked away. The weight of morning didn't rise that day. It crept. The sky over Pittsburgh was a bruised gray, heavy and slow to brighten, as if the sun itself was hesitant to look upon what the blackout had done. Inside the Benton house, the air still smelled faintly of smoke and coffee. The windows were fogged, the stove cold, and the silence between mother and daughter was almost sacred. Not empty, but cautious. Zoe sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a quilt, tracing circles on the mug Laura had given her. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flash of Trent's lighter, the dust falling, her mother's arms pushing her to safety. "Do you think he's gone?" she finally asked. Laura, sitting across from her, didn't look up. She was bandaging a scrape on her wrist, the skin raw where the beam had caught her. "He will be," she said. "He's not the type to stick around once the light comes back." Zoe nodded, but her stomach twisted. She wasn't sure she believed that. Laura poured 2 cups of coffee. One for herself, one she set in front of Zoe without comment. The gesture wasn't an apology. It was something gentler, a start. For a long moment, neither spoke. The kitchen clock was frozen at 2:14, the exact minute the power had died the night before. The only sound was the slow drip from the faucet. Finally, Laura said, "You know, I used to think the worst thing in the world was people finding out about my drinking, that they'd see me as weak." She looked down at her hands, the faint tremor still there. "But the real shame wasn't being weak. It was pretending I wasn't." Zoe glanced up. "You never told me much about it. I didn't think you'd want to know." "I do." Laura's lips pressed together. A small, reluctant smile. "Then I'll tell you. Someday. Not all at once." "But soon." Zoe nodded, her throat tight. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up unevenly. Generators hummed here and there, the smell of gasoline mixing with the scent of rain. People stood on porches, trading rumors about when the grid would be restored. Children rode bikes through puddles. For once, there was no factory siren to mark the shift. The stillness felt strange, like the city had forgotten how to move. Laura stepped onto the porch, mug in hand. The chill bit at her cheeks, but she didn't mind. She looked toward the horizon, where the river shimmered faintly between buildings. Somewhere, beyond that fog, lay the mill where everything had almost ended. She didn't regret going there, but the memory sat heavy in her chest. The sound of her daughter's scream, the beam collapsing, the sharp smell of burning wires. She took a sip of coffee and let the bitterness anchor her. Zoe watched her from the doorway. Her mother looked smaller somehow, though she stood straight. There was something vulnerable about seeing her outside of the factory uniform. Just a woman in a flannel shirt and worn boots, holding herself steady in a world that kept shifting. "Mom?" Laura turned. I want to stay," Zoe said. "I mean here. I don't want to leave again." The words came out rough, embarrassed. Laura didn't answer right away. She walked back inside, set her mug on the table, and brushed a stray hair from Zoe's face. "Then stay," she said softly. "But if you stay, we do it different this time. No secrets. No pretending we don't hurt." Zoe nodded, tears stinging her eyes. Okay, they hugged. Awkward, hesitant, but real. The kind of embrace that says we're trying, even if we don't know how. Later that afternoon, the lights flickered once, twice, then came back. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked forward, and for the first time in almost 24 hours, the house breathed again. Zoe laughed quietly. "Guess the city's alive," Laura smiled. Barely. But the smile faded when she saw the small red light blinking on the answering machine by the phone. She pressed the button. "Hey, Laura, it's Mark Hanley. Listen, I heard about the transformer fires down by the river. Some guy was seen leaving the mill. Security caught it on the cameras before the power went. They said he was carrying something that looked like electronics. Cops might want to talk to anyone who was down there. Just be careful, okay? And call me." The message ended with a click. Laura's stomach turned cold. She looked at Zoe, who'd gone pale. "He's still out there?" Zoe whispered. I know. They stood in silence for a long moment, the hum of electricity suddenly feeling less like comfort and more like warning. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. She sat by the window again, candlelit even though the lights worked now. The city glowed faintly outside, fragile, like it could go dark again any second. Her phone sat beside her, Mark's number on the screen. She hadn't called him back yet. She wanted to. She wanted to tell him everything. How she'd found Zoe. How the man from the past had almost destroyed what little she had left. How scared she was even now, sitting in her own house. But instead, she whispered to the quiet room, I can't need anyone else right now. The words felt heavy, half a lie across the river in a small abandoned lot. Trent sat by a fire barrel, nursing a swollen hand. He watched the flames lick upward, shadows dancing across his face. The bag of stolen parts sat beside him, half burned, half spilled. Worthless now, he pulled out his phone, the screen cracked. He scrolled through old messages with Zoe, laughing emojis, late-night jokes, the kind of warmth he hadn't felt in years. He stared at them for a long time. Then with a single flick, he deleted them all. When the last one vanished, he whispered, She was supposed to be different. The wind picked up, scattering ash into the air. Back on Stanton Street, Laura finally stood, stretching the ache from her back. She walked quietly to Zoe's room. Her daughter was asleep, curled under the blanket, the faintest smile on her face. For the first time in months, she looked at peace. Laura brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, then whispered, You're safe now. Zoe stirred but didn't wake. Laura stepped out, closing the door softly behind her. She didn't notice the small slip of paper that had fallen from Zoe's backpack onto the floor. A receipt, crumpled, smeared with dirt, from a convenience store near the river. Timestamp, 1:03 a.m., signed T. Hanley. Laura froze. Mark's last name. She picked up the paper. Frowning, somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again. Faint this time, but enough to make the glass tremble. Ghosts in the static. The morning after the lights came back, the house didn't feel like home. It felt watched. Laura moved through the rooms in silence, her hands busy but her mind running wild. She'd hidden the receipt in her apron pocket, the one marked T. Hanley, 1:03 a.m. from the convenience store near the river. She kept touching it, as if the paper itself might confess something. Mark Hanley had been her friend for years, a man from the factory who always had a kind word, who dropped off groceries when she was sick, who once fixed her porch light without being asked. But what were the odds that his last name showed up on a receipt near the mill, the same night Zoe had almost died? She told herself it had to be a coincidence. Pittsburgh was full of Hanleys. Still, the name burned through her thoughts like a slow fuse. Zoe woke late, her hair tangled, eyes puffy from sleep. Didn't we have a message from Mark last night? She asked, rubbing her arms. Laura hesitated before answering. Yeah, he said there was footage from the mill. That someone was seen leaving before the fire. Zoe frowned. Trent. Maybe, Laura said quietly. Zoe nodded, then glanced around. You look pale. Did you sleep? Laura forced a smile. Not much. Coffee? Zoe nodded, settling at the kitchen table. When Laura turned toward the stove, Zoe noticed something sticking out of her mother's pocket. The edge of a folded receipt. She almost asked, but something in Laura's posture stopped her. Her mother's back was tense, shoulders slightly hunched, a stance Zoe hadn't seen since she was a child, back when Laura used to stand over the sink counting coins before rent day. So instead, Zoe said nothing. Later that morning, Laura made an excuse to walk to the corner store. The streets were half alive again. Cars idling, neighbors sweeping debris off porches. A boy dragging a branch across the wet pavement. The sky hung low and gray. She stopped outside the convenience store from the receipt. The owner, an older man named Raj, was restocking the window display. "Hey, Laura," he called. "You survived the blackout?" "Barely," she said, trying to smile. "Listen, I need to ask you something strange." Raj looked up, curious. "Strange, I can do." She unfolded the crumpled receipt and handed it over. "You remember who this was? Bought something here that night?" He squinted. "That was during the outage, right? We had power from the generator." He studied it for a moment longer. "Yeah, I remember that one. Tall guy. Work boots, flannel, kinda jumpy. Paid cash." Laura's heart kicked hard. "Did he say his name?" Raj shook his head. "No, but I heard him talking to someone on the phone. He said, 'Tell her I'll handle it.' She doesn't have to know." Raj paused, lowering his voice. Sounded tense. "Handle what?" Laura asked. Raj shrugged. "Didn't say." Laura walked home with the receipt burning a hole in her coat pocket. The city felt different now. Edges sharper, sounds louder. Every passing car made her flinch. She didn't like the way things were starting to fit together. Mark's voicemail, the fire, the receipt, the way he'd warned her to be careful. By the time she reached her porch, she'd made up her mind. She dialed his number. It rang twice. "Laura!" Mark's voice came bright, relieved. "Hey, I was hoping you'd call. You okay?" "The news said part of Stanton lost power." "I'm fine," she interrupted. "You said you heard about the cameras. You sure nobody else was down there that night?" Mark hesitated. "Why? You think someone you know was?" She didn't answer. "I mean," he continued, "they haven't released much. The security feed's half-fried from the surge. Only caught a few frames. Can you send me one?" He laughed softly. "That's not exactly legal, you know." "Please." Something in her tone must have cracked through him. He sighed. "All right, give me an hour." When the message came through, Laura's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. The image was grainy. A blurred silhouette near the loading docks, mid-step, carrying something metallic. The timestamp matched the fire. The figure's face was hidden under a hood, but the stance, the height, it wasn't Trent. Laura knew that shape too well. Her breath caught. It was Mark. Zoe found her mother sitting at the kitchen table again, staring at her phone, coffee untouched. "Mom?" Laura looked up, her face pale. "Zoe, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to be honest." Zoe frowned. "Okay." "The night of the blackout, did anyone else contact you? Besides Trent?" Zoe hesitated, biting her lip. "Why?" "Please." Zoe reached for her phone, scrolled, then handed it over. There was one number that texted after the power went out. Said they were a friend of yours. "Told me where you might be. Near the mill." Laura read the number. She didn't need to compare it to know. It was Mark's. Her stomach turned. "Zoe, did you tell anyone where you were going?" "No, I didn't even know until Trent said we were headed to the docks." Laura stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. He knew we'd be there. Who did?" Zoe asked, alarmed. Laura didn't answer. She grabbed her coat and keys. "Mom, where are you going?" To get the truth. The factory district sat quiet and skeletal by late afternoon. Laura's boots echoed on the damp pavement as she walked past the fences and broken lights. The smell of soot still clung to the air. Mark's truck was parked near the edge of the lot. She approached slowly, her breath visible in the cold. He stepped out when he saw her, smiling faintly. "Didn't expect you so soon," he said. "You got the picture then?" "I did," she said. "That's why I'm here." Mark tilted his head. "You think that's me?" "I don't think, Mark. I know." His smile didn't fade, but his eyes hardened. "You should be careful making accusations like that." "I should have been careful the night you told Trent where my daughter was," she shot back. You were helping him, weren't you? Mark sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. You've got it wrong. Then tell me. He stepped closer. You don't understand. I was trying to protect you. By setting a fire? His voice rose just enough to echo off the metal walls. By keeping you from getting caught up in something worse. Trent was stealing company files. If those hit the market, we'd all lose our jobs. Maybe more. I told him to scare you off, not burn the place down. Laura's heart pounded. You used my daughter. I told him not to touch her. Mark's voice cracked. He said she'd listened to him, said she was different. I didn't know she'd be there when the power blew. Silence. Only the wind moved through the broken windows. Laura stared at him, disbelief and fury mixing until she could barely breathe. You think that makes it better? Mark took a step closer. Laura, everything I did because I... She cut him off. Don't say it. He hesitated. Because I care about you. She shook her head, backing away. You don't get to call this care. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. You lied. You used me just like he did. Only you were better at pretending. For a moment, neither moved. Then Laura turned and walked toward the street, not looking back. Mark called after her once, softly, desperately. But the sound of her footsteps swallowed his words. That night, the power flickered again, just a momentary pulse, and the house fell into darkness. Zoe sat by the window, watching the distant skyline blink on and off. She thought of her mother somewhere out there, walking home through the gray. Then, faintly, the phone buzzed on the table. A message. Unknown number. You think you're safe now? Zoe's breath caught. She stared at the screen, at the single typing bubble appearing and vanishing. Then nothing, just silence and the faint hum of static. The quiet between storms. The city looked different after what happened at the mill. Too clean, too quiet. Like Pittsburgh had washed its hands of the night before and was pretending it had never happened. But inside the Benton house, silence had weight. It sat heavy in the corners, between the tick of the kitchen clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. Laura hadn't spoken about the confrontation. She'd come home long after dark, wet from the rain, her face drawn and pale. She'd gone straight to her room and shut the door without a word. Zoe had wanted to ask, wanted to know what her mother had found, what she'd done. But something in Laura's expression told her to wait. So she waited. The next morning, Zoe made breakfast, toast, scrambled eggs, and coffee. The smell drifted through the house like a small olive branch. Laura emerged slowly, her hair still damp from a shower, wearing an old gray sweater that looked 2 sizes too big. Morning, Zoe said softly. Laura hesitated before answering. Morning. They ate in silence for a while. Then Zoe asked, Did you see him? Laura's fork paused midair. Yes, and? Laura set it down. Her eyes met Zoe's, tired but clear. He admitted everything. Zoe swallowed. About Trent? About using him. About using us. Zoe's jaw tightened. What are we going to do? Laura took a long breath. I don't know yet, but I'm not letting him near us again. The words were steady, but Zoe could see the tremor in her mother's hands as she lifted the coffee cup. After breakfast, Zoe lingered by the window. The streets outside were washed clean by rain. A mail truck rolled slowly by, tires hissing on the wet pavement. Mom? Laura looked up from the sink. What if he doesn't stop? Laura didn't answer right away. She turned off the faucet, dried her hands, and crossed the room to stand beside her daughter. If he comes near you again, she said, her voice quiet but sharp, we go to the police. No more waiting. No more giving people the benefit of the doubt. Zoe nodded. Okay. But even as she said it, a knot of worry pulled tighter inside her. She'd seen men like Mark before. Calm on the surface, chaos underneath. And she remembered the text message from the night before. You think you're safe now? She hadn't told Laura about it. Not yet. The day dragged by slowly. Laura tried to clean, to keep busy, wiping the counters, folding laundry, even mending an old curtain by hand. She told herself that motion meant safety, that if she kept the house alive, she could keep the past at bay. But every creak of the floorboards made her turn. Every sound outside, a door slam, a car starting, made her heart kick harder. By late afternoon, the sky had gone the color of steel again. The forecast said another storm was coming. Zoe sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through her phone. The screen glowed faintly against the dimming light. "Mom?" Laura looked up from her sewing. Zoe hesitated, then said, "There's something I didn't tell you." Laura's hands stilled. "What is it?" Zoe turned the phone so she could see the message. "You think you're safe now?" The air in the room changed. "When did this come?" Laura asked, her voice low. "Last night. After you left. Did you respond?" "No." Laura stood slowly, eyes fixed on the words glowing in the screen's dark reflection. "Delete it," she said finally. "Then block the number." Zoe hesitated. "You think it's him?" Laura didn't have to answer. That night, thunder rolled low over the hills, the kind that feels like it's crawling under your skin before it breaks. Laura couldn't sleep. She paced from room to room, the floor cold beneath her feet. Checking the locks twice, she thought of all the things she hadn't said to Zoe, all the truth she'd tried to bury beneath years of exhaustion and shame, how she'd almost lost her daughter to her own silence. At one point, she caught her reflection in the darkened window, a woman she barely recognized. The same eyes but older, weathered, harder. She whispered to the glass, "You keep fighting, don't you?" No answer came, just the faint tap of rain. Around midnight, a knock came at the door, 3 slow raps. Laura froze. "Mom?" Zoe called from her room. "Who is it?" Laura's voice was steady. "Stay there." She crossed the floor quietly, her breath shallow. Peered through the curtain. It was Mark. Rain slicked his hair to his forehead. He looked thinner than she remembered, his jacket hanging loosely from his shoulders. "Laura," he said, voice muffled through the door. "Please, just let me explain." Laura didn't move. "You already did." He pressed his hand against the glass. "No, not all of it. You need to hear the rest." "I don't want to hear anything from you." He looked desperate now. "You think I wanted any of this? You think I meant for her to get hurt?" Zoe appeared behind her, voice trembling. "Mom, who—" "Go back to your room," Laura ordered, but Zoe didn't. She stood beside her mother, glaring through the glass. "Go away," she said. Mark's eyes flicked toward her, then back to Laura. "You told her everything, didn't you?" Laura's jaw tightened. "Get off my porch, Mark!" He stepped back, water streaming down his face. "You don't understand. He's not gone, Trent, he's out there. And he wants both of you to pay." For a moment, the rain seemed to stop. Zoe felt her chest tighten. "You're lying." Mark shook his head. "I wish I was." Then, slowly, he pulled something from his coat pocket. A small flash drive sealed in a plastic bag. "Everything's on here," he said. "The footage, the files, the names. If anything happens to me, you'll know who to blame." He set it down on the step. "I never wanted it to end like this." Then he turned and walked into the storm, swallowed by the night. Laura didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table again, the flash drive sitting between them like a heartbeat. Zoe finally broke the silence. "Do you believe him?" Laura stared at it. "I don't know." Zoe rubbed her arms, shivering. "What if Trent really is out there?" Laura met her eyes. "Then we finish this." Her voice was quiet, but it carried something new. Not just fear, purpose. "Tomorrow," she said, "we go to the police." Zoe nodded, though her stomach twisted with unease. Neither of them noticed that the phone charger light near the counter had turned on by itself, or that, for just a flicker, the screen of Laura's phone lit up, a single notification, new video received. From unknown. The flash drive morning came gray and hollow. The rain had stopped, but everything still dripped. The streets, the gutters, even the trees seemed to weep quietly under the low Pittsburgh sky. Laura hadn't moved from the kitchen table. The flash drive still sat there, the smallest thing in the room, but it carried the weight of something enormous. Zoe came in, hair pulled into a messy braid, still wearing last night's sweatshirt. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. Laura shook her head. "Didn't feel like I could." "Do you think it's real?" What he said. Laura looked down at the drive. "There's only one way to find out." They plugged it into Zoe's laptop, the one she'd kept hidden for months during her secret online life. The screen blinked, the little spinning icon appearing as if deciding whether to cooperate. A folder popped open. Hanley Docs Private. Inside were 6 video files, a few text documents, and something labeled Access Report 1-47. Laura's stomach tightened. "Click the first one." The video opened to grainy footage, surveillance from the factory's loading bay. The timestamp read 12:55 a.m. blackout night. It showed Trent moving fast, throwing something metallic into the back of a truck. Then seconds later, Mark entered the frame. He was shouting, his mouth open, though there was no sound on the footage. He grabbed Trent's arm. They struggled. Then the lights flickered, and the image cut to static. Zoe leaned forward. "He wasn't lying," she whispered. Laura swallowed. "No, he wasn't." She clicked the next file. This one was clearer. An office camera. The same night. Mark stood near a desk covered in papers, talking to someone off screen. His voice came through faint but audible. "We can't keep hiding this. They're cooking the numbers, dumping waste into the river again. If this gets out, the city'll shut them down. That's why he's taking the files." Then the door opened, and Trent appeared, rough, desperate. "You said you'd pay me." "For information, not arson?" "You can't prove anything without me," Trent spat. "You're as dirty as they are." The screen glitched, then froze on Mark's face. Furious, terrified. The video ended. Zoe's hand trembled on the keyboard. "Mom, this isn't just about you or me." "No," Laura said softly. It never was. They opened the report next. Lines of text filled the screen. Chemical readings, water samples, falsified safety signatures, access report number 47, detailed months of factory violations, toxic discharge into the Allegheny River, forged maintenance logs, employee bribes. And every document bore the same signature at the bottom, M. Hanley, environmental supervisor. Zoe looked at her mother. He was trying to fix it, wasn't he? That's why he was covering things up. Laura nodded slowly. Maybe, or maybe he thought he could control it before it went public. She scrolled further down. Near the end of the file was a note in smaller text. "If anything happens to me, the truth is in the water." Zoe frowned. "What does that even mean?" Laura stared at the line, her pulse quickening. "It means he left proof." "Real proof? Where?" "The river," Laura said. "Where else?" By afternoon, the sky had darkened again. They packed what they needed: gloves, flashlights, the drive. Zoe protested when Laura insisted they bring a small hammer for protection, but didn't argue long. They drove toward the riverfront, the old factory smokestacks rising like black teeth against the skyline. "This is crazy," Zoe muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Laura's eyes stayed on the water ahead. "Maybe, but if we don't do this, someone else will. And next time, we might not get a warning." When they reached the banks, the water was high and thick with runoff, swirling with debris from the storm. Laura led the way down a dirt path to the spot where the old drainage pipes emptied. It smelled of rust and rain. She crouched low, shining her light into one of the grates. "There," she said. Zoe leaned in. Something metallic glinted behind the grate, half buried in mud. They pried at it together until the object came loose. A sealed waterproof container, small and scratched but intact. Laura opened it slowly. Inside was another drive, this one labeled Project Cinder. Zoe exhaled. He wasn't lying. "No," Laura said. He was drowning in it. They returned home in near darkness. The storm hadn't fully broken yet, but thunder rumbled at the edge of the horizon, the city's lungs filling again before another downpour. Zoe plugged in the new drive. Inside were company emails, contracts, lists of payouts to city officials. But one file stood out. Video 017. Laura clicked it. The footage began inside an office. Not Mark's, but one of the senior managers, a man Laura recognized from the factory board meetings. Mark stood across from him, voice shaking with anger. "You told me the leaks were contained." "They are. No one cares about a few gallons of runoff, Mark. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." "It's poison. You're poisoning the river. My people drink that water." The manager laughed. Soft, cruel. Then maybe they should move. The video cut off there. Zoe's eyes were wide. "We have to take this to someone." "The police, the news, someone." Laura nodded. "Tomorrow morning." She ejected the drive, set it carefully on the counter beside the first one. "Tonight we rest," she said. "Tomorrow we make noise." But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her, of movement just beyond the window glass. She crossed to pull the curtain shut and froze. Footprints. Fresh. Leading up to the porch, Zoe came beside her. "Mom?" Laura's voice was a whisper. "Someone's been here," the phone buzzed. A message. Zoe's heart skipped. "You shouldn't have gone to the river." Her blood ran cold. Then another. "You never learn, do you, Laura?" Zoe looked up at her mother, the words catching in her throat. "It's him." Laura took the phone, her jaw set. "Let him come." Outside, thunder cracked so loud it shook the window panes. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out. They stood in the dark, listening to the rain beat against the roof, the faint creak of the porch. Zoe whispered, "Mom, what do we do?" Laura reached for her daughter's hand, gripping it tight. "We stay quiet," she said, "and we wait." But in the silence that followed, there was a new sound. Slow, deliberate footsteps across the porch. Then a voice, low and mocking, muffled through the door. "You really think you can fix what you broke?" Zoe's breath caught. Laura didn't move. "Open the door, Laura," the voice said. "Let's finish what we started." The storm breaks. The storm came down like judgment. Rain battered the roof with the fury of 1,000 fists, and the wind howled through the broken eaves like it was trying to rip the whole house free from its foundations. Inside, Laura and Zoe stood frozen in the dark, the faint blue light of Zoe's laptop blinking weakly on the table. The only proof that somewhere, not long ago, they still had power, safety, control. Now, all of it was gone. The man outside rapped his knuckles against the door. Not hard, not yet. Just steady, knock, knock, knock. A cruel rhythm in the storm. "You never learn, Laura," he said again. "You think the truth will save you. It won't." Zoe's hand shook in her mother's. "Mom," she whispered. "Who is it?" "Is that—" Laura pressed a finger to her lips. She knew that voice. Trent Keller, the same man who had stood on that surveillance tape, dragging metal crates into a truck. The same man who had screamed at Mark Hanley before the lights went out. And now, he was on their porch. Laura leaned in close, her whisper barely audible above the storm. "Listen to me. Go to the back room. Quietly. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a movie, Zoe. This is real. Go." But Zoe shook her head. "I'm not 12 anymore. You think I can just run and hide?" Something flickered in Laura's eyes. Frustration, yes, but also something deeper. Pride, fear, love, all tangled together. "Fine," she said finally. "Stay close. Another knock. Harder this time. I'm getting cold out here, Laura. Let's talk like adults," Laura called back, her voice steady though her pulse raced. "There's nothing to talk about." "Then I guess I'll let myself in." The sound that followed made Zoe flinch, the slow screech of metal as the doorknob twisted. The hinges protesting under strain, Laura grabbed the small hammer from the table. "Get behind me." The door creaked open an inch. Then another. A sliver of lightning lit the porch, revealing Trent's face, unshaven, eyes red, rain dripping from his jaw like sweat. He smiled, a thin, dangerous curve. "Evening, ladies." Laura raised the hammer. "You need to leave." "That's not very neighborly." He stepped over the threshold, mud tracking behind him. "You took something that doesn't belong to you." Zoe's voice quivered. "You mean the drives?" He glanced at her. "So the kid knows." "Smart girl. They belong to Mark," Laura said. "You killed him, didn't you?" For the first time, his smile faltered. "Killed him? No, he made his own mess. I just cleaned up after." "You cleaned up by stealing evidence." He shrugged. "Someone had to." "I was told to keep it quiet." "By who?" Lightning flashed again, and for a moment his expression turned feral. "You think I'd tell you that?" He took a step closer. Laura didn't back away. The wind blew the door shut behind him with a crash, trapping the three of them in the dark house. The sound made Zoe jump. Her flashlight tumbled to the floor, rolling until it pointed upward, casting eerie shadows across their faces. Trent's eyes flicked toward it, then back to Laura. "You've been busy digging, huh? Going to the river, plugging in files, playing detective. You don't know what kind of people you're messing with." Laura steadied her breath. "I've been messing with people like you my whole life." He laughed low, shaking his head. "Still think you're tough? I remember that look from the factory. The one you gave the bosses every time you thought you were better than them. Guess what? You're not." "Maybe not," she said quietly. "But at least I can look my daughter in the eye." That stung him. She saw it. "You don't know what it's like," he snapped. "Getting orders from men who can ruin you with a phone call. You think I wanted this job? I did what I had to. Just like you. You hurt people. So did you." He barked, voice rising over the thunder. "You think your record's clean? You covered up spills too, remember? Back when you were desperate for overtime? Don't pretend you're some hero now." Zoe's gaze shot to her mother. "Mom, what is he talking about?" Laura's chest tightened. The hammer trembled in her grip. "He's twisting the truth. Am I?" Trent sneered. "Tell her about the night number 8. The chemical leak you helped patch before the inspectors came. Zoe stepped back. Mom? Laura's eyes glistened. I did what I had to, Zoe. We needed money. Your father had just left. You were a kid. I'd save it, Trent growled. You're no saint. None of us are. Lightning filled the room again, and for a split second Laura saw the reflection of something in his hand, the dull gleam of a gun. Put it down, she said sharply. He smirked. Relax, just insurance. I'm not here to hurt anyone. Unless you make me. Zoe's breath came out in shudders. You're insane. Maybe, he said. But I'm not the one poking around where I don't belong. Laura glanced toward the table, where the flash drives still lay. You came for those? Trent followed her eyes. Hand them over. No, he sighed almost theatrically. You always make things hard. He lunged forward, but Laura swung the hammer first. It connected with his wrist, the gun clattering to the floor. He shouted, staggering back, Run, Zoe! Zoe bolted for the hallway. Trent grabbed Laura's arm, twisting it hard. She cried out, struggling. They crashed against the table. Papers, cables, coffee mugs scattering everywhere. The flash drive slid across the floor. Spinning to a stop under the cabinet, Zoe skidded back into the room with the flashlight beam shaking in her hand. Mom! Laura shouted. Get the drives! Trent shoved her backward, reaching for the gun, but Laura kicked it away, sending it skidding under the counter. For a moment, everything was chaos. Rain hammering the roof, thunder booming. 3 lives colliding in the dark. Then the window shattered. The wind roared in, sending glass spraying like rain. And outside, through the broken pane, the sudden wail of a police siren cut through the storm. Trent froze. You called them? Laura's chest heaved. No, but I guess somebody heard the noise. For a moment, his eyes darted between the door and the gun. Then muttering a curse, he backed away. You think this is over? He hissed. You have no idea how deep this goes. He turned and ran into the night, vanishing into the storm. The front door banged in the wind, the sirens drawing closer. Zoe dropped to her knees beside her mother. You okay? Laura nodded weakly, wincing. I'll live. They looked around. The wrecked kitchen, the broken glass, the rain pooling on the floor. Then Laura saw it. The 2 drives lying near the wall. Safe, untouched. She picked them up, pressing them tight to her chest. We end this tomorrow, she whispered. Zoe nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Together, Laura smiled faintly. Together! Outside, the storm raged on, cleansing, punishing, beautiful. The morning after dawn broke pale and tired over Pittsburgh. The city felt washed out, the world scrubbed raw by rain. Streetlights blinked uncertainly over puddles that caught faint glints of sunrise, and for once, the air smelled almost clean. Inside the house on Duncan Street, everything was still. The storm had ripped the night apart, but somehow Laura and Zoe were still there. Bruised, shaken, but breathing. The kitchen was a ruin of shattered glass and overturned chairs. A trail of muddy footprints led from the door to the counter, then vanished into the night like a ghost that had finally decided to let go. Laura stood by the sink, rinsing blood from her knuckles under a trickle of water. The wound wasn't deep, but it stung. A reminder that the fight had been real, not some bad dream she could wake from. Zoe came in quietly, her hair damp, her hoodie zipped all the way up. She was holding 2 mugs of instant coffee, bitter, weak, but warm. Figured we could both use this, she said softly. Laura smiled, weary. That's the first kind thing this kitchen's seen in a while. They stood there for a moment in silence, the hum of the fridge filling the spaces between them. Zoe took a sip, winced. Still awful, Laura chuckled, then grew serious. You okay? Zoe hesitated. I keep replaying it. The door, his face, the gun. I didn't think people like that actually existed outside movies. They do, Laura said. They just don't always wear masks. Zoe nodded, eyes distant. What happens now? Laura looked down at her bandaged hand. Now? We take this to someone who can do something with it. The police? Laura sighed. The police will take one look at me, a factory worker with a record and a story about corruption, and file it under inconvenient truth. No. We go higher. Who's higher? The press, Laura said. Real journalists. The kind that still care about water, air, people. They drove downtown later that morning, the city still littered with broken branches and flooded drains. Laura's old Toyota coughed like it was as tired as she was, but it kept moving. Zoe held the flash drives in her lap, wrapped in a clean towel as if they were something sacred. At a stoplight, she turned to her mother. You really did cover up a leak once? Didn't you? Laura's jaw tightened. Yes. Why didn't you ever tell me? I was ashamed, Laura said quietly. It was a small job, or that's what they told me. The pay was double. I convinced myself it was just one night of looking away. I thought I was doing what I had to do to keep us alive. Zoe looked out the window at the passing gray streets. You always said we were better than the people who cut corners. Laura's voice broke. We weren't, Zoe, not then. But maybe now we can be. They drove the rest of the way in silence. The Pittsburgh Herald office stood on the edge of downtown, a tired brick building with a faded sign and windows streaked with grime. Inside, reporters moved like ghosts through narrow aisles of paper and flickering monitors. A woman at the front desk glanced up, her voice flat with fatigue. Can I help you? Laura stepped forward. I need to speak to someone about a story. A big one. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. Everyone thinks theirs is big. Laura reached into her bag, set the 2 drives on the counter. Mine has proof. Something in her tone made the woman pause. After a long moment, she picked up the phone and said quietly, 1 minute. They were led into a small office with a half-open window and the faint smell of cigarettes. A man in his late 30s sat behind the desk, rolled up sleeves, tired eyes, but sharp. Cal Whitman, he said, offering a hand. Investigative desk. What have you got for me? Laura sat down, Zoe beside her. Files, surveillance, company reports from Hanley Steelworks. They've been dumping chemicals into the Allegheny for years. Cal leaned forward. That's a big accusation. It's not an accusation, Laura said. It's evidence. She slid the flash drives across the desk. Cal plugged one in, brows furrowing as he scrolled through the folders. The room filled with the soft hum of the computer. When the first video played, Mark confronting Trent, the threats, the cover-up, Cal's eyes went wide. Where did you get this? From a man who worked there, Laura said. He's gone now. Gone? Dead. Cal leaned back, exhaling. Jesus, you realize what this means, right? This could blow the lid off one of the biggest industrial scandals in the state. Zoe spoke up quietly. Then do it. He looked at her, something like admiration flickering across his face. I will, but I'll need statements, names, background. You ready to go on record? Laura hesitated. If it keeps them from poisoning another river, yes. It took hours. The telling, the retelling, the signing of papers. Cal's recorder sat between them, blinking red as Laura's voice carried through the small office. Her years at the plant, her silence the night she almost broke, the fights with Zoe, the storm. When it was over, Zoe sat in the corner, eyes red but calm. Cal shut off the recorder and leaned forward. This is powerful, Laura. It's not just about pollution. It's about people, survival, guilt. I can't promise how high it'll go, but I'll make sure it's heard. Laura nodded, exhausted. That's all I want. Outside, the clouds had thinned. Sunlight filtered through like mercy. Hesitant but real. They walked back to the car slowly. Zoe turned to her mother. You think he'll really publish it? Laura smiled faintly. He looked like a man who's tired of lies. I trust that kind. Zoe laughed softly. You trust anyone anymore? Laura stopped walking. You. I trust you. It was the first time she'd said it in years. Zoe blinked, caught off guard. Even after everything? Especially after everything. That night, they went home to the quiet hum of a house still scarred from the storm. Plastic taped over the broken window, a single bulb hanging from a frayed wire. But it felt different now. Lighter, somehow. Laura made dinner. Just soup and toast. And they ate in silence. The kind that didn't hurt anymore. Afterward, Zoe found an old photo album on the shelf. One she hadn't touched in years. She opened it beside her mother on the couch. There they were. Her at 8, missing teeth. Her mother in a factory uniform, grinning despite the grime. The little house that had somehow survived everything. Zoe traced the edge of a photo and whispered, Do you think Dad would have been proud of us? Laura looked at her daughter. Really looked. Maybe not proud of how we got here, but proud that we're still standing. Yeah, I think he would. Later that night, the phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. From Cal Whitman. The story goes live tomorrow. Get some rest. You both earned it. Laura read it twice, then smiled. She put her phone down and turned off the lamp. The house fell into darkness. But it was a soft, peaceful dark this time, not the kind that hid monsters. Outside, the city hummed again. Power lines alive, streetlights steady, the world moving forward. And somewhere far down the river, the water flowed clean under the morning sun. The bitter sip. The morning paper hit the porch before sunrise. A dull thud that echoed louder than any siren, louder than the storm that had ripped through their lives just days ago. Laura stood at the window, wrapped in her old flannel robe, the one with a coffee stain on the sleeve that never came out no matter how many times she washed it. The kettle hissed softly on the stove. Outside, the world was still damp, the air sharp with the metallic scent of rain and redemption. Zoe came down the stairs, her hair still tangled from sleep. "It's out, isn't it?" Laura didn't answer. She just nodded toward the door. Zoe stepped out, bare feet on cold wood, and picked up the newspaper. The headline screamed in bold black letters across the front page. Hanley Steelworks, Scandal, Toxic Cover-Up Exposed. And beneath it, a smaller subheading, Exclusive, Former Employee Laura Ellis Speaks Out. Zoe's voice trembled. "Mom, you're on the front page." Laura smiled faintly. "Well, guess that makes me famous." They sat at the kitchen table together, steam rising from two mismatched mugs. The same table where coffee had once been thrown in anger. The same kitchen where silence had lived for years. But now, the silence was different. Not cold, not broken. Just waiting. Zoe read aloud from the paper, her voice soft but strong. A whistleblower from Hanley Steelworks has revealed years of environmental violations, falsified safety reports, and corporate intimidation. The evidence includes confidential recordings, internal memos, and first-hand testimony from factory workers. Authorities have launched a full investigation. Several arrests are expected. She looked up. "You did it." Laura stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking gently against the mug. "We did it." Zoe smiled, small but real. "I'm proud of you." Laura blinked, caught off guard by how much those words meant, how long she'd been waiting to hear them. "That's funny," she said quietly, "because I was just about to say the same thing." The day stretched slow and golden, sunlight finally spilling through the taped window like forgiveness. Neighbors stopped by, some to drop off flowers, others just to say thank you. A reporter even called from the local radio station, asking if Laura might give a live interview. She said maybe later. For now, she just wanted peace. By noon, the city was buzzing with it. Her story. On every corner, people talked about Hanley Steelworks, about rivers and lies, about one woman who refused to stay quiet. But for Laura, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about finally telling the truth. Not just to the world, but to herself. That afternoon, Zoe stood by the sink washing dishes, humming softly. She looked calmer than Laura had seen her in years. "You know," Zoe said, "when I threw that coffee at you, I thought I hated you." Laura leaned against the counter, her expression softening. "I thought I'd lost you for good that day." "I didn't hate you," Zoe continued. "I hated what I didn't understand. You were always working, always tired. I thought you just didn't care. But now I know you were fighting. In your own way." Laura swallowed, her eyes shining. "I wasn't always right. I made choices I can't undo." Zoe smiled through tears. "So did I, but I think that's how we learn who we are." Laura chuckled, shaking her head. "You sound wiser than your years," Zoe grinned. "Maybe it runs in the family." Later, as evening fell, they took a walk down to the river. The water moved slow and dark beneath the bridge, but it felt cleaner somehow, like even it could breathe again. Zoe stopped halfway across, leaning on the railing. "Do you ever think about him? About Mark?" Laura's gaze followed the ripples. "Every day. He tried to do right, even when it cost him everything. I think he'd be glad it finally came out. I think he'd be proud of you," Zoe said. Laura turned to her daughter. "And you? He'd be proud of you too." For a long while, they just stood there, mother and daughter, silence flowing between them like the current below. When they got home, night had fallen. The kitchen smelled of coffee again. Fresh this time, Zoe poured 2 cups and handed one to her mother. "Truce?" she said, smiling. Laura took it, raising the mug slightly. Truce. They sat across from each other, the quiet hum of the refrigerator their only soundtrack. Laura took a sip, winced, then laughed. "Still bitter," Zoe smirked. "Guess some things never change." Laura met her daughter's eyes. And for the first time in years, there was no resentment there, no distance. Just warmth. Just home. She lifted the mug again. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes the bitter sip's the one that wakes you up." Zoe smiled. "Then maybe we were both asleep for too long," Laura nodded. "Not anymore." Outside, the city lights shimmered across the river, the same river that had carried their secrets, their sins, and now their salvation. Somewhere, deep in the hum of Pittsburgh's night, the world kept moving forward. One truth, one breath, one sip at a time, and in that little house on Duncan Street, two women finally found peace in the bitter, honest taste of forgiveness. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.